Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Survive This Crit. This episode, we have the pleasure of being joined by Rich S. Sargent. Rich hails from Pittsburgh, PA, where he grew up watching horror films with his mom. Rich is truly a savant in the creative arts, working on projects from coast to coast in a variety of capacities, from being a director and theater board member of the Black Ice Theater in Lake Tahoe, to being a co-founder of the indie rock band The Wintergreen with his husband, to even authoring the Horror Movie Night Cookbook filled with mouth-watering brews and eats to enjoy along with your favorite horror movie. And he does so much more. So welcome, Rich.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That's very nice. Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Typically, what we like to start with is some warm-up questions so we get to know you as a horror fan, because the core reason that we have guests on here is because that they're horror fans, and that's who we love to talk to. So, Rich, what was the first horror movie that you remember seeing?
That I remember seeing is Scream, but I like you mentioned, I grew up watching horror films with my mother. It was always like the old Hammer films and the black and whites, and I just don't have vivid memories of what exactly we watched. But I knew I loved horror at that point. And then the first movie that I really wanted to go to, and I was too young, was Scream. And my cousins volunteered to take me, and it was the best experience. And Scream is probably what got me to love horror so much.
That's awesome. I feel like Scream is such a great theater experience to watch.
It is, and it was so cool too, because when we went to this like little old-timey theater, and right as the opening with Drew Barrymore, right as things were getting a little tense, all the lights went out, the film stopped playing. It was so freaky. I was like peeing my pants. But eventually it came back on and it was awesome. But I just felt like that was probably the best experience I've had with a horror movie actually scaring me in real life.
Oh my gosh.
What was your favorite scene from Scream? We're curious because we already did like a deep dive on Scream like a few months ago. So
it's also my favorite. So we're definitely on the same wavelength.
Nice. I have a huge crush on Nev Campbell and always have. So obviously it would be something with her, probably the bathroom scene when she's at school. But my favorite of all of the Scream films is Scream 2, where they have to climb over the ghost face in the car. I have seen that movie 1,000 times, and I still get tense when that comes on.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best scenes in horror.
Is this a rare case where you think the sequel's better than the original?
I think 1 and 2 are definitely on par with each other, and the rest are kind of hit or miss. But
yeah, I think the rest, they bring in some interesting stars and like final girls, but it's not the same as like the lightning in the bottle that they had in the beginning.
Right. 3 is good. It's a little campy, so it's not my favorite. 4 I thought was a nice return to form, a little scary. 5 and 6, I'm not quite sure I like the direction that they're heading, but I'm excited for 7.
All right. Yeah, I guess we all got to watch 7 when that comes out.
Enough about Scream. Let's transition to a different horror movie, specifically Dawn of the Dead. Since that's the movie that we're talking about in this series. Rich, could you want to talk about your history with this film specifically? Do you have a history with it?
So I believe that Romero's masterpiece is Night of the Living Dead, but I do appreciate Dawn of the Dead. I think it has a lot to say about society, especially at that time, and how they were able to stretch their budget is like an inspiration to me, because as a filmmaker also from Pittsburgh, like Romero, seeing how they were able to just do such amazing things with such a small budget is very, very inspiring for an independent filmmaker. So that's sort of how I connect to it in my own life.
Well, you also are a fan of the remake because the recipes in your book are actually based on the remake. So what about the remake is more appealing to you? Is it like the story or the budget? What stands out to you?
I think they did a great job with making the story their own. The budget does help. It's definitely a more slick production. But I think as far as remakes in horror, there are a lot of misses. And this one is probably a huge hit. It's one of the best remakes, I think. And in the first 10 minutes of the film, I think that's some of the best, probably top five openings of any horror film that I've seen. While they kind of shrug off the social commentary a bit, although it is nice to see that the mall is like not very full. And at the time, malls were kind of on their way out. And so he does kind of touch on that a little bit. I think just it was a nice, fresh take on the idea.
All right. That's good for me to know because I actually haven't seen the remake. So I'll be adding it to my watch list based on your recommendation.
You should, and you should use the recipe in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask as we're keep talking about horror for a couple more minutes. So you obviously are a huge fan of horror, but is there a horror film that you just absolutely despise?
Oh gosh. Oh, I hate to talk negatively, but I don't know if you've seen it, and it's a very divisive film, and some people love it and will defend it to the death. But I absolutely hated Skinamarink.
I've never seen that.
It came out last year, and it is very much for the crowd that can sit and watch like ASMR videos for hours. Nothing at all happens. It's just, and and it has decent reviews, which I don't understand. And some horror films really, really connect to it. I thought it was probably the most dull thing I've ever watched. So I don't recommend watching it, but everybody likes their own stuff. So
I mean, if someone is really into ASMR, that may be the perfect film for them.
Exactly.
But for the rest of us, probably not. In reference to the horror that you dislike, is there a trope that you really strongly dislike? It can be one that's used more historically or one that's used today. I mean, as we were talking about Scream earlier, Scream really utilizes the tropes to make like almost a joke out of it. But yeah, do you have a trope that you're like, okay, we're watching this again?
I think the worst thing is when the writers have run out of ideas and they just throw in a cheesy jump scare. I think jump scares can be done very well, but the ones that I hate are the ones where like a cat jumps out of the closet or like the radio turns on or like something absolutely ridiculous. This does not fit the story at all or further the story at all. I think that's the trope I absolutely hate. It takes me right out of the movie.
Yeah.
We were actually just talking a lot about jump scares in our previous series because we were doing The Conjuring. And I was like, it's just jump scare after jump scare after jump scare. Like, it's nonstop.
But arguably, I think they do it very well in that one.
They do. It's better than some of the other jump scary films. But there are a couple that, like, after you're on jump scare number 12, you're like, okay. I just need to like look at my phone for a couple minutes so I can start some deep breathing.
Right? Yeah. Is something actually real gonna happen, sort of thing? So that's what I absolutely despise. Yeah.
So one question that we always ask our guests on this show is, are you a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn when it comes to confrontation? Because I feel like those are really important when it comes to fighting off the killer in this show. In every film, there's always a tactic that the final girl or guy or whoever takes to attempt to survive.
I hate going into a situation not knowing what's happening. So I think initially I will probably freeze to try to take in what's actually happening. And then most likely I will run the hell away. But but I'd like to say
that's a fair and very honest answer.
I'd like to say I would fight, but I probably wouldn't. I mean, I'd rather try to survive and get out of there. So
yeah, I mean, if there's a whole horde of zombies.
Right. I'm not going to do anything, with my water bottle here. So might as well just get the hell out.
It's very fair. So in reference then to Dawn of the Dead, the 1978 one specific, what would be your tactic to survive?
I think that I'd probably follow along with that group. I think they did the best they could in that situation, and if I could, I would go with them and just try to buckle down and wait for them to come to me and see if I could fight them off, get as prepared as I could. And then, if I do manage to get away, I would go as far away as I can, like in the helicopter. So, I think I would probably do exactly what they did.
The idea of trying to survive a zombie apocalypse in the mall is actually pretty genius because you have everything you could possibly need. It's like trying to survive in a Costco.
Right.
But
Right.
you see,
Yeah.
here's the thing. You can't do the Costco because rarely does Costco have ammunitions,
That's a good point.
But Walmart or something like that, depending on what state you're in, you have ammunition, you have food, you have clothing. I think like the malls now probably aren't as useful, like you're saying, but going somewhere like Walmart or well, really, that's the one I can think of
Yeah,
that
I was
is
trying to
like the
think,
best
like
place to
Walmart is
go.
now the new mini mall.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's got
Yeah.
everything you could possibly need.
What about your zombie apocalypse plan? What's your go-to strategy? Real quick.
So Joshua and I actually talked a lot about this when we started dating. My husband, it was like one of the things that he's a Marine, so that was very helpful. I was like, well, cool. As long as I stick with him, I'll be fine. But his strategy, because I very specifically when we were dating, I sent him a picture of the foggy coast in Southern California when I was living near the beach. And I was like, man, this is zombie weather. And that's kind of been a joke between us since then. And he said, because I asked him, I was like, all right, what would you do? And very specifically, he's like, I would go to a very small remote town, kind of like my hometown. He's like, I would stock up there, stock up ammunition, everything that we would need. We'd make sure we're within driving distance from there. And then he mentioned a whole bunch of gear that I don't know the meaning of, but that he knows the meaning of. And I was like, cool. As long as I stick with you, I'll be fine. Because I don't mind killing a couple zombies. But as long as I don't have to do the particular planning of this part, then I think I'll be good.
Yeah,
I like that
feel like
plan.
sticking with Josh. I feel like sticking with Josh is a good plan.
Is that what you do, Nick? You just should find us?
If you guys are nearby, probably. Otherwise, initially I was always like the person who would be like, "Oh, I'll probably just overtake a mall or a Costco or something." But honestly, after watching Dawn of the Dead, I feel like the best plan after seeing that movie is a hillbilly shooting party.
Yeah.
It's just everyone's got a gun. It's just everyone's just there to have a good time, and everyone's just looking out for each other.
Then you're gonna
perfect.
love the remake.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
I'm definitely gonna have to watch it now because I feel like we only got a very small snippet of the hillbilly shooting scene from the original Dawn of the Dead, and I'm sure the remake is like even more elaborate because it was so entertaining.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Since you mentioned the remake, one of the coolest things, like the first thing that we learned about you was that you author a horror movie cookbook. I actually ordered it for Nick for his birthday last year as a surprise for him. So what inspired you to create this horror movie night cookbook?
I was doing a staged version of The Woman in Black with a few of my friends, and they happened to mention that they hate the horror genre and they haven't seen much. And I was really offended by that.
I would be too,
So I thought, okay, I have to educate these guys. So I picked 3 movies a night and I showed them, my favorites or ones that I thought were important to the genre and to society, and we would have our own horror movie nights. And about halfway through, my friends were like, "What are you going to do with this?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "This is awesome. Other people are going to want to do this too." And I thought about, maybe hosting events or something like that, special events at different restaurants, things like that. And that felt too localized for me. So I decided to turn it into a cookbook so that people could do it at home in the comfort of their home and host their own parties and have fun with it. So that's sort of how it came into development.
Wow, that's incredible that you wanted to bring people into your circle, just inviting people in. And you brought them in a way that connects everyone. Because I feel like food and drink is one of those things that you can bond with anybody over, even if you're not necessarily in the same headspace or the same genre. You can really just bond over that.
One thing that I really liked when Kylie first gifted me your cookbook was I read it and it kind of reminded me of there's this Instagram account that my wife would always send me videos on where it's like Disney movies and the person would make a Disney themed meal to pair with that movie. And I was flipping through your cookbook and I was just like, this is perfect. This is the horror theme of this. And my wife, of course, rolls her eyes because she hates horror films. I have not successfully converted her. Kylie and I have both tried. It's not, it's tough. The thing I like about this was that it was horror themed, and I wanted to know from you, what do you believe about how food and drink impact a good movie night?
Everybody has their thing. So like some people just prefer to order a pizza and drink a beer or whatever it is. That's their comfort level. They like to, cuddle in bed and with their box of pizza and whatever. But for me personally, I really like what I did with the book. I like having something to eat from the film that I'm watching. It just makes me feel like I'm part of it, and something to drink inspired by the film too. And the more you drink, if you don't like the movie, it'll still be fun.
Yeah,
the movie will age like fine wine.
Exactly. So yeah, and adding the drinking games is always a fun thing too. So
oh man,
I love that. I wish I could have used that on a movie we watched last night. We found one of those free movies on Amazon called Pot Zombie. It was truly terrible. We should have known by the title, but
yeah,
it was one that we were like morbidly curious about. Where we're like, we're walking into a death trap of some sort, but I'm so curious. I gotta know, and it's an hour of my life I'll never get back.
But was it bad in a good way?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, bummer.
The same production company made another film called Frankenhooker, and that was one that was bad in a good way. Where
exactly.
It was a little campy. It was the story actually had kind of a good ending, an interesting ending, but Pot Zombies was like, oh, everyone was definitely stoned the whole time they were making it. It was just people dying every time they smoked pot. That was it. Oh. That was the plot.
That's the message, huh?
Yeah. But it was interesting because like the beginning they put alerts saying like, we do not condone smoking marijuana. And we're like, I can't tell if you're trying to get us for it or against it. It's really unclear.
Oh, that's a bummer.
I know, it's one of those that like, if you want to waste an hour of your life, it's definitely one to check out that it'll be hard to erase from your memory anytime soon.
Good to know.
I'll
probably have to get really high for it.
Yeah, exactly. So what is your process though when it comes to creating themed recipes? Is there a specific like scene that inspires you or a character? Because I'm actually going to be making your Conjuring recipe after we record your interview.
Awesome. I hope you like it. Well, the movies in the first book, I kind of know front to back like the back of my hand. So for me, I kind of knew where I wanted to go with what scene I was going to draw from. But as I'm working on the second book, I'm having to go back and revisit some of the films, which is awesome for me because I always love, rewatching a good movie. But I've had to go back and rewatch some and kind of draw inspiration from my second or third viewing. So I don't really have a process. It's just whatever I find that works, and that I think that will help, bring the audience into the movie. So not just something random from the movie. It has to like mean something is sort of my process. And then if I find something that, in my own family history or something that I've been making for a really long time, I'll try to alter that so that it fits the film. But if there's nothing, then I'll start creating my own new recipes and test those, 10 times and see if I can perfect them. So that's sort of how I go from start to finish.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's interesting that you're not necessarily inspired by one scene or one character. It's cool that you just are whatever comes to you creatively, like that creative flow in the moment.
Yeah, it's sort of an in the moment thing. Absolutely.
So, talking more about your recipes, I guess one thing to know about me first off is that cooking's like one of my favorite hobbies. My wife and I do it. It's probably the biggest way that we bond. Um, and so like we watch a lot of like Binging with Bobbish together, stuff like that. And one thing that first caught my eye when I was looking through your recipes was just the ingredients that you list. Like I remember the first one I did for this podcast was the popcorn one. And the first thing I see there is like bag of microwavable popcorn. I'm like, what? Wait a second. That's not that's not something I see in every cookbook. And so it popped in my mind. It got me curious. Like in this day and age, it seems like everyone trends to like, oh, I have to make everything from scratch. But yours takes the opposite direction of let me, give
Simplify.
my reader, yeah, as many simplified ingredients as possible. And I was curious about why you chose to go that direction.
Yeah, I did try to simplify some of them because a lot of them are on the harder side.
Mm.
But I did want some of them to feel a little bit like hacks that even the worst home cook could make. So, Scream is one of them. Jaws is one that I think, you know, turning a biscuit into a donut. I think anybody could do that. So I wanted it to appeal to everybody, people that are the best cooks in the world and people that are the worst. So that's sort of where I, kind of how I was developing it. And I made it in such a way that you can take notes on the recipes and alter it for yourself. And maybe if you really love an appetizer recipe and want to turn that into a meal, you can take notes and do that yourself. I wanted it to be sort of customizable. So if you're the person that likes making popcorn from the kernels, you can still use the other part of the recipe to complete it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. And honestly, your recipes, they've all been hits in my home. The popcorn recipe, oh my gosh, that had to be one of the lemon juice and butter, brown butter. It was my wife and I just couldn't get enough of it.
Oh, thank you
Um,
so much.
but yeah, and honestly, it's a big help for us too sometimes because I'm new to recording myself while cooking. And I got to tell you, what what would always be like in my mind, like, oh, this recipe, I'll get it done in like 30 minutes, an hour. My wife and I will be in the kitchen for like 2, 3 hours late at night. Be like, come on, Nick, you have to get this right. And it's always because like, oh, you didn't put your hand here, Nick, at the right time. Or like I'm trying to like shave a lemon, or was it zest a lemon? And she's like, no, Nick, you look awkward and robotic when you're doing it. I'm like, okay, let me try this again.
Yeah, I don't envy you for doing that. When I put the book out, my team was wondering if I wanted to do videos, like cooking videos and stuff like that, if I was offered it, and I had a panic attack. Like that sounds awful to me to have people watch me try to create something in the kitchen. It's a hot mess. But I do appreciate the final product. So good for you for doing that.
It's a new series for us. We're taking your book, and I have one other horror cookbook, but we're gonna keep cooking through your recipes when they align with the films that we're doing, because like we
Thank
Yeah.
we
you.
want other people to have that experience of being able to allow food and drink to join the conversation and to make it a full experience and an event, something to look forward to on a Friday night movie night type vibe.
I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to transition to us a little bit away from the cookbooks just for a few minutes to talk about your career in theater. You're the second person that we've had with a theater career, actually, which is really interesting. And you're the theater board director and member of the Black Ice Theater in Lake Tahoe. So I was curious how you got started in this industry because I'm a theater girly as well. My degree's in theater. So I'm really excited to connect with the fellow theater folk. So what's been your path in theater?
My degree is also in theater.
Let's go.
I I when I was a kid, I was watching Matlock, dating myself. They were reruns. I saw him and I thought, okay, I want to be like a lawyer.
Mhm.
And then my family was like, oh no, he's an actor. He's just pretending. And I was like, oh, okay, so I want to be an actor. And so I would do all of the plays I could in school, and I went to college for it. And right out of school, I moved to New York City, and I was um, pretty successful. And I found that I love theater, but my real passion is film and television, commercials, that sort of thing. So, I got really lucky there. I was pretty much consistently doing something in the arts while working my other day jobs. But when I moved west, I became artistic director of a gay theater company in San Francisco called the Left Coast Theater Company, and they focus on original short plays. And I really fell into that. I loved writing, and I got to direct and star in some of them. And when I moved to Tahoe, the same group that I introduced to the horror movies, we decided to form our own theater company. And so I've been producing artistic director there for a really long time. And now that I live in Palm Springs, I sort of stepped back. So I'm still on the board and one of the founding members of it, but I uh, I don't do as much. I'm more of a consulting position now. So I'm taking a little break from theater. I'm watching a lot of theater. I'm going to a lot of theater here, and that's really fun. But I've always really enjoyed it, and I've always loved that feeling of being alive and anything can happen on stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's sort of my history with it.
I love that. I had a very similar path to you in some ways where I was in theater and then I was like, "Oh, film seems fun." So that was I had a very similar transition to you. So I am curious what about the film industry then stands out to you in such a different perspective than theater? Because initially I'd written down more questions about theater, but since you have such a passion for film and that's where your career and your interests are headed, what about film is so different than theater that you've wanted to actively pursue it and take a pivot out of the theater industry in some ways?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I think it's just something I love being on set. I loved, um, working out of order sometimes. I just loved the environment of it, and it felt like I don't know. It just felt more right to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
theater and what it can do for a community. Brings everybody together all at once to share an experience together, and hopefully, it sparks conversation and debate, and maybe changes you a little bit in some way. And I love that about theater. But I think film can do that too, a good film, and it also could reach a wider audience. So
Mm,
it can maybe affect even more change.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And what's your favorite type of role to do on a film set? Do you have a particular department you like to work in, or do you like to be in front of the camera, behind the camera?
I do like to be in front of the camera. That's probably my favorite, but I also love to direct. To have control over the final vision and the final message of the story is something I've really always enjoyed. As an independent filmmaker, I do write, direct, and sometimes star in my own stuff. And and I have something that I'm working on now that hopefully I'll get to shoot maybe by the end of the year or next year. But I'd say, yeah, probably acting first, directing, and then writing.
Mm.
Mhm. What's been your greatest memory as a director, though?
Oh, mm,
It can be
yeah,
theater or film because we know you've done
yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of both.
I would say my greatest memory. as a director is probably we did a show in Black Ice Theater Company did a show called Sans Merci. I don't know if you know it, but it's a tragic tale. And the way just I was running lights and sound up in the booth with my one of my co-founders, and watching the audience react to what they were doing was just the most amazing feeling. Like, wow, we are really affecting these people. This is the power of theater. And, I love cheesy theater too. I love all those cheesy musicals out there and things where you just go to the theater and have fun, but really like watching an audience connect with something human
Mm-hmm.
has always been my passion. So that's probably the greatest memory is probably watching them slowly get out of their chairs for a standing ovation, just while sobbing. And that sounds horrible, but it just like it moves you to see how you can connect with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you make someone cry and that was the goal, then you've done your job. Like you've done
No.
more than your job at that point.
Funny little
Yeah.
side story for me was not make me cry, but it was a couple of years ago. I love going to theater, but we don't get to go out that often. My wife and I, have you ever seen the play Hadestown?
Oh yeah, it's one
Oh
of my
yeah.
favorite.
Oh my God. So that's the thing. My wife and I for years had just been listening to the soundtrack, and I was like, okay, one day we're gonna go see this. And it happened to or it happened to be in town for Tucson. And we're like, yes. And I got all excited about it. Yeah, we took a friend. We're watching the film. I had no idea. I had never read the original Greek myth of Morpheus.
Mhm.
And when that ending happens, which I guess spoiler alert, for anyone who hasn't seen this musical that's been out for years now, or read the original Greek myth, when Orpheus turns around and, just that I forget the female lead's name. Oh,
Yeah.
Eurydice, yes. Turns around to look at Eurydice at the very last possible second and just loses her forever. I kid you not. I was like a split second away. I had to control myself by whispering it to my wife. I was like, "What?" But I was ready to stand up in the entire theater, like, "What? No, that cannot, that can't be how this ends."
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I saw that on Broadway and it was life-changing. Oh my goodness. And I also saw the tour that you went to as well. Just a life-changing musical. And
Mhm.
those are the types of musicals I really connect to. Great show. Can't recommend that enough.
The ones that tell human stories, even if they're Greek myths, but they're still very like human in the emotional core
Absolutely.
side. Would you say that's
Absolutely.
something that inspires you as an actor, connecting
Mhm.
like at an emotional level, whether you're connecting with the camera or with a fellow actor on stage?
Oh, it's all about connection. Absolutely. I tend to not take roles that are just sort of there for no reason. There's lots of roles out there like that. Is if I find, especially in theater, that magic moment where you're connecting with your co-star, it's you forget who you are. I mean, you just transcend to a different plane, and that is such a special thing for any artist, any actor. So yeah, it's all about the connection for me.
I would agree with that as someone who's worked in theater and I still do it some recreationally, not necessarily professionally anymore. But I do want to know, because this industry is so cutthroat, whether you're on the theater side or the film side, what has been the greatest lesson that you've learned as an artist in this industry? And I know that's a loaded question. So if you have more than one thing, that's totally fine. But
No, it's really not. I mean, for me, the one thing that I say I've learned is to just keep going. Starting out as an actor in New York or LA is so difficult. You're going to get so much rejection and it's not going to be personal. You just have to keep going. And, maybe one day your theater company does a show that you think is brilliant and nobody shows up.
yeah.
Just keep going. Do the next one, do the show the next night, and just perform it as if you're performing to an audience of one, perform it as if you're performing to a full house. Just keep going. If your first script doesn't get picked up, write another one. don't give up. That's the biggest lesson I've learned. Something will fall into place. Something will be the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. What would you say is what are you most proud of overall as an artist that you've done in your career so far? Because you've taken the path less traveled. You've never given up, like many of us do along the way. Like there's so many people out there who feel like they can't make it, so they move back home or just take a job that they hate and they won't create anymore. But you're one of the few who has stood the test of time. So what would you say
Uh,
is your most proud moment as an artist?
I was very proud when we were able to get Black Ice off of the ground. And it also makes me so proud that we were able to work with so many talented people that weren't getting an opportunity in Tahoe to help them grow and watch them, you know, perform and give it their all. And I'm just so proud of what we've been able to accomplish uh, within the community there. Um, even when it's not our biggest hit and we don't make money on it, giving people a platform to share their art has always been something I'm so proud of.
I mean, you get to even do that with your cookbook, allowing people to create at home, creating however they can.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I'm very happy with the response to this. I wasn't sure how it was going to go at first. I'm like, nobody's going to want to do this, but it's the response has been very positive to the book, and I'm very proud of that too. I'm very happy that people are loving it.
Well, I will say real quick for our listeners, I scoured the internet for horror cookbooks. Like I deep dived the internet, and yours was the only one for a chef as well established as Nick that I was like,
No, not a chef. Don't put that
as
on.
a cook, as someone who enjoys cooking as much as Nick, these recipes provide both the challenge and the comfort that I haven't seen from any other books that I have. And I probably am going to order my own copy as well. Although I don't know when I would necessarily need to eat alligator bites. I did see that in yours. And I was
Always.
like,
Have you never had
interesting.
alligator?
They are so good. Alligator is my favorite meat.
It's so delicious. Go to Florida, Kylie. Go to Florida. Get yourself. There are restaurants where you can get alligator, turtle, and frog's legs all in one go. It's one of the best trios of fried food you can ever get.
That's why
you.
Florida is its own breed. It's its own. Florida's different than everyone else. I've held an alligator, like a baby one, but I've never eaten it. I've never looked at it and been like, yeah, this could go inside of me and everything would be okay.
It's so good.
Then you're not exploring your palate, Kylie. Come on.
Apparently not. I'll give it a try for you when I order the cookbook. I will make the alligator bites and I'll hit you up and let you know how it goes.
Please do. You can always use chicken.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty similar.
Chicken out, no pun intended. It may be chicken. But if it's similar enough, I'll make it work.
Oh, yeah. So we talked about your career as making cookbooks, your career in theater. Let's talk about just really quickly your career in music. I mean, wow, you really are just like a jack of all trades. And I want to know what helped inspire you to start a band with your husband.
So the Green Winter was a pandemic project for us. Everybody that got trapped inside their houses was going a little stir crazy and, had to sort of change their way of life and work through things. And I started writing lyrics to sort of work through things that I have been struggling with my whole life. And we decided to put them to music, and we really liked how it was turning out. So we decided to make an album, and we called that Disaster Piece Theater, and we released it ourselves. And people seemed to like it. We put out a little Christmas EP that actually does really well every year. And so we just decided to keep going. By no means are we, Taylor Swift or anything trying to put out a record every year. But we have stories to tell. And my husband has been in the music industry for a very long time. He toured with a punk band, and so we just sort of used that as our stepping stone to just create in other ways. We just we're both creators, so we just keep going with that. And so we just put out our second album last year, and our third one should be coming out in a few months.
That's amazing.
Very exciting.
Yeah. I mean, who knew that a pandemic project could turn into something that could bring joy to so many other people? Because I believe I saw from one of your guys' pages that your music had been streamed in so many different countries that it was reaching people, which is a huge accomplishment.
I mean, that's insane to me that, people are listening to our little tiny two-person We Do Everything band in Europe. I don't know, but we're going to keep doing it anyway, even if no one listens, because it's just stories we need to get out there for us to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of how it all came to be.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And we totally feel that it's like with our tiny little two-person podcast that we do. Because we'll get like notifications about like, oh, you have viewers in Switzerland or and I'll message her like, do we know anyone in Switzerland right now? Because it's a valid question sometimes.
Yeah, which one of our friends traveled to Switzerland? Yeah, no, I know. I feel the same way. It's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask, because you're a writer as well, when you transition, your writing skills into song, where does that come from for you? Is that, I know you mentioned, I'm not trying to dig up trauma. Let me just say that frontward, because I know you said these songs are very personal to you, but is there a process that you have that differs from being a screenwriter versus a songwriter? Because I imagine poetically, those are very different mediums.
Oh, it's a very different process for me. For me, if I come up with a melody or a line or a whole chorus, I'll sing it into my phone and then sit down and write the rest. And it tends to flow at a pretty natural, speedy pace. But when I write a play or a screenplay, it's not as quick, and it's more, I have to really, focus and think about where it's going and what these characters are going to say. And I'm just me telling my story as one character. I have to think about the stories of so many other characters when I'm writing something else, for the stage or screen. And it's just I have to be more committed and inspired and dedicated to get those types of scripts done.
Yeah. It's interesting that music flows so much more for you, even though your career had been theater and film. It's interesting that the musical lyrics are much more natural for you. They just come out of you, which is really cool.
I've been listening to music since I was in the womb, so I know there are people out there that don't like music, and it blows my mind. but I've been listening to so much music throughout my life that I find it something that like creating a song comes naturally to me, and it may not be the best thing out there, but it's something that I find I can really connect with and grow from and get better.
So what's your favorite genre of music then?
I'm a 90s alternative kind of guy. And that's sort of where our band kind of leans into. I love, pop punk and emo as well, but 90s alternative is my jam. But I'll listen to anything out there if it's good.
If it's good, that little asterisk there.
I'm not in love with where music is going now, but take me back to the 90s.
I know, right? Oh my God. So yeah, go listen to anything that's good, but punk is like right there at the top of my heavy rotation playlist. Like I got Goldfinger in my ear almost all the time. Like any of that punk bridge to the ska early 2000s time. I'm just like, this is my jam. This is what gets me pumped and working throughout the day.
Nice. Yeah.
This is something I didn't know about you, Nick. I just learned something new.
You didn't know I listened to ska?
No, actually, I didn't. I'm actually really surprised. You and Joshua would probably have a lot to talk about in regards to your music taste.
I know that's the thing. I've always been depressed that like Josh and I haven't had the moment yet. We had a little bit of a moment when I first met him, but we haven't had a true moment yet. We just have a guys just road trip where we just start listening to our favorite music because I know it would be great, but it just the moment hasn't arisen yet. But anyway, moving back to this, moving back to this before we get too far off tangent. So between all the different art forms that you excel in, Richard, which one is your favorite between like theater and music or writing, any of that?
And that can be your favorite today, because I
Yeah.
recognize as a Renaissance woman that yeah, it changes constantly.
But I do think that my favorite is and always will be film. I just love watching them as much as I love writing them and being in them. And I just there are so many stories out there that I love taking in and seeing other points of view and seeing the amazing things that people can do with film. I think it will always be my favorite.
And film, I mean, it's timeless, like in some ways, but it's also a great time capsule for the past, the present, and even the future with what we're trying to create. And looking ahead to the future, what would you say is the greatest challenge that would face artists today?
It's so weird because we're at a place where anybody can do anything. Like my husband and I just decided to make an album and put it out there. You can do that. Anybody can. It's not as restricted as it was back in the day when you needed, to go into a studio with a producer and you needed to get a contract and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, everything, because everybody can do everything, there's so much competition out there that your thing needs to find its way to stand out. So I think that the challenge now is finding your own niche where you can be above all the other noise that is out there and reach people. And that's a huge challenge for me because I mean, sometimes you just feel San Francisco theater, for example, when I was there, there's just so much theater for people to choose from. How do you get people to come to your show? It's so hard to find a way to reach your audience, even though you can create all this stuff. That's where the challenge is, finding your audience and getting them to come back over and over and over again.
Yeah. I think something that you said in there really stood out to me of like artists can really create whatever they want today. And I'm gonna ask a question slightly against that point. I feel like in film today we have more rules than ever when it comes to creating. And a lot of those rules are there for a good reason. But when I was researching Dawn of the Dead, which was made in the 1970s, they got to pay people $1 to be an extra on the film, whereas today I'm not sure the exact rate, although I used to work in background casting, so I should know. You have to pay them like $120 per person now. So would you say that same principle applies to film, which is where your passion really lies?
I think it does. I mean, I think that, you know, yes, if you're in a SAG film or after, I don't even know which one unions still exist at this point. But if you're in one of the unions, yeah, you have to follow their rules. But if you're not, which I am not, I was SAG eligible and I just decided to not join because there were other projects I wanted to do and it wouldn't allow me to do them. So if you are non-union, I think you can just grab your friends, grab a camera, if you have a screenplay that you've written, go out there and just film it. And if it's not getting picked up, put it on YouTube. Maybe somebody will watch it that, wants to work with you in the future. And, I do firmly believe that anybody can do anything. I don't think, yes, there are rules for people that have to follow them, but if you're not one of those people, go do you.
I love that. Just go do you. That's such a
Mhm.
good reminder for all the artists and creatives out there that are maybe feeling discouraged if they're in like a corporate role that they don't love, because I've talked to a few people like that lately, or they just don't know what's going to happen next, just go out there and create something. Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
good.
Totally. Yeah. Just because when you first do it, it may not be perfect, but as you keep doing it, practice makes perfect, as they say, for a reason. You know, you get better at it. We went and saw Kevin Smith the other night, and he was talking about how he watched a movie and thought, what the hell, I can do that. And that's how Clerks came to be. He just went out, got his friends, and did it, you know? And so maybe you'll be that person, you know? Maybe it won't not be good. Maybe you'll be the next Kevin Smith. Go out there and try something.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a good encouragement to our audiences out there.
Mhm.
So, as we enter our final question, we wanted to see what you're currently working on and how audiences can keep up with you, because we want to make sure everyone can keep up with all the cool work you're doing and make sure that everyone buys your cookbook, because it truly is very cool. It's the coolest cookbook I've seen in a very long time.
Thank you so much. I am currently working on a bunch of things. We're putting the finishing touches on our next album, which is a cover album of songs that were written by men but made popular by women. And so now we're going to go back and do it as men, gay men. So take a little interesting twist on that. And then I'm also working on the next Horror Movie Night cookbook. I'm also working on a different film cookbook. Some of the feedback that I got was that I love the idea, but I hate horror. So I'm actually going to do one for chick flicks.
Ooh.
Can you give us a sneak peek of one film that will appear in that cookbook?
Sure. I'm going to do Bridget Jones' Diary, and it's going to be the blue soup
Whoa.
Love it.
the leeks that she tries to make, and she leaves the string on and it turns blue. I'm going to do that, but not toxic.
How much would someone have to give you to make sure that the movie White Chicks is featured in your cookbook?
Oh, a lot.
You can make the whole meal that they order on the date.
Maybe when I do the cult classics one,
Okay.
I can, which is coming down the pipeline too in the future, hopefully. Maybe when I do that one, I'll include White Chicks.
Oh my gosh, sorry. You said chick flicks, and that's the first one that came to my mind.
But isn't
Got
that
chicks in
one
the
more
name.
for men? Like, don't men like that one more than women?
You,
I don't know.
yeah, I would think
I
so.
grew up
But
on
my
that
wife,
one.
I was surprised how much my wife, who's black, just loved the film. Just like she was like, "You seen White Chicks?" When we were dating, I'm like, "Yeah, I've seen White Chicks," and she's like, "Oh my gosh, one of the favorite movies."
Well, maybe I'll do a little bonus on the Horror Movie Night Cookbook Insta with a recipe for that. Just put it out there.
Yeah,
Oh my
Just
that
for
gosh,
makes
that'd
you.
be so
everyone's
great.
got to follow the Horror Movie Night Cookbook. That's the tag on Instagram at Horror Movie Night Cookbook.
Yes.
Is that your main way of audiences keeping up with you?
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook is the best. Facebook, you can just search Horror Movie Night Cookbook and it should pop up. I'm linked, my personal profiles, I believe, are linked to both. So if anybody's so inspired, they can follow me as well.
And they got to follow your band Instagram too.
Oh, yeah, Insta at
Yep.
the Green Winter Music. And on Facebook as well, you can search the Green Winter Music and you should be able to find us there. But yeah, so new album, new cookbooks. Like I said, I'm working on pre-production on a film that I'm finally going to sit down and do. And let me see, my theater company is still going strong. Our next show coming up, if you're in Tahoe, is called First Date. It's a musical, and
I know that musical.
it's super cute.
Yeah.
It's not typically what we do, so it's a little different for us, but go see it. You can find us at blackicetheaterco.com, and all the info is there.
Yeah. Oh, yay. Amazing. Reminder
Very
to our
exciting.
audiences, support local theater.
Yes.
It's so important as a backbone. I grew up doing local theater. It's like been the backbone to my whole career. So thank you so much, Rich, for joining us today. I mean, I feel like we've learned so much about just what you do and just had a great encouragement about just to keep going as an artist, even when who knows who's listening. I just appreciate you sharing your insight and your enthusiasm with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe we'll have to have you back when your second book comes out.
Whenever you want me, I'm here for you.
Awesome. Good to know. So thank you to our lovely audience for listening to this episode, and thank you, Rich, for being our guest here today. Just want to remind everyone, please leave a like, leave a comment to help us boost our numbers, help get the show out there. So thank you all, and bye.
Bye, everybody.